They need a research and development budget to explore how AI can help their company, their industry. If they don't have a budget and a team around that, I think they're going to fall behind. That's number one.
Impulses and Perspectives, the DIKT Expert Talk hosted by Nikolai Behr.
Welcome to another episode of Impulses and Perspective, the DIKT Expert Talk. Today we are discussing a topic that is moving from science fiction into business reality faster than many leaders expected. Deepfakes, AI-generated deception, digital trust, and the future of leadership. And my special guest today is Bryce Austin, Cybersecurity advisor, former Chief Information Security Officer, and co-author of our new English language book, The Age of Fakes: How AI Abuse, Fake News, and Deepfakes Threaten Business and Society. Bryce, great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Nikolai.
Bryce, when did you personally realize that AI-generated deception was no longer just a theoretical problem, but a real problem for companies and organizations?
To be honest with you, it was when I saw how much better the phishing emails were getting that were coming in, both to me and my clients. The first time I ever had a spear phishing email, which is where someone custom wrote it for me, it was in 2018, obviously not a native English language speaker, had some pretty significant holes in it. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. In fact, I'll go up on stage now in front of an audience and take that email from 2018 and put it into ChatGPT and say, make this sound like a professor from the University of London and not quite so urgent. And it is perfect within 10 seconds. Well, I'm not the only one doing that as an example. There are cyber criminals around the globe doing that every single day. And that's when I knew that we have a problem. What we used to teach our employees to be on the lookout for, to know when it's a malicious email as opposed to a legitimate one, it doesn't work anymore. It's turning the world on its head.
Was there a specific moment or a technological development that made you think this is going to change fundamentally how organizations have to operate?
Boy, that's a good question. I will say that the power of AI to be able to manipulate the sort of information that both goes into and comes out of an organization is very strong. And that there are two concerns with that. If there are organizations that are not utilizing AI for their own benefit, as an example, I used to hire a developer and he would write code to help with the vulnerability scans my company does, to enhance penetration tests. I know what I want out of a computer and I know enough about them to know what is and isn't reasonable to ask, but I'm not a coder. I've never been interested in that. Well, I don't need to be anymore. I can have a couple hour conversation with an AI engine and get what I need out of it, not have to hire a developer anymore. Well, there are companies that if they don't understand where AI can have a competitive advantage, they're going to miss out. So I think that's a huge problem for companies that kind of have their head in the sand. And there are people using this against them, not just from a cybersecurity angle, because that's my specialty, but to try to put out potentially negative press about other companies. The fact that AI can try to detect those things in social media and can be out there looking for what the vibe is about your company right now. It's a powerful tool. So if companies aren't investigating AI right now, I think in 5 years, they may very well be irrelevant.
Definitely. So probably you have the same observation. When I do a keynote on these topics, a lot of people think still deepfakes are probably something like entertainment or like an internet culture. Why do you think business leaders underestimate that topic still?
Change is hard. Kodak invented digital photography. They did it so that we didn't have to wait for a satellite taking pictures around the globe to send the film back down to Earth and have it developed. They wanted it in real time. And Kodak came up with that technology. but their executives got their bonuses based on how many developing chemicals that they sold. And so the very technology that they invented that put traditional photography essentially out of business, well, they ignored it. I think a lot of executives aren't ready for this level of change. And it's difficult to realize that what got us to where we are isn't going to get us to where we need to be. So that it's a fundamental shift in not just how we use technology, but how we do work. That's a big deal. I don't know that we've seen a shift this fundamental since the internet kind of came to be useful, maybe 25 years ago, around the year 2000?
Yeah. And
I bought my first plane ticket on the internet, I think in maybe 94 or 95. And I remember doing banking on the internet in 97-ish when I moved to San Diego. And it was a fundamental shift. When was the last time you were inside a bank unless you needed cash? You don't really do that anymore. AI is coming and it's going to change things quickly. And the companies that aren't willing to say we have to rethink how the world's going to work 5 years from now are going to be left behind.
So what worries you more today, the technology itself or the speed at which society adopts it?
From my standpoint, in the cybersecurity area, it worries me more about the technology itself because it is powerful. There is a project out called Mythos right now that is trying to look for vulnerabilities in areas of code that have been around for years or even decades, and it's doing a very good job of it. I think the difficulty with AI is that it is not perfect. It makes mistakes. It'll get things wrong. As a cyber criminal attacker, you don't care. If it is only right 90% of the time and 10% of the time it royally messes up whatever it is that you're doing, well, you just chalk that up to experience and you move on to another victim. Well, as a defender, we need to be right all the time. And AI is not right all the time. I just asked it last week. I was watching a science fiction show with my family, and we wanted to know about the speed of light and how long it would take to get messages to and from Mars, because in the show it was a hypothetical there. So I asked ChatGPT. I knew the distance and the speed of light from the Earth to the sun was 8 or 9 minutes. Well, how far is it to Mars? So I asked it, and it came back 3 to 22 minutes. And I'm like, that's not possible. I said, Mars does not come inside the orbit of the Earth. And then it came back, oh, I'm so sorry. I sent you the speed of light between the Earth and Mars. That's not what you asked. You asked for the sun to Mars. Like, how did you miss that? That's pretty fundamental. Well, as a defender, that is a horrific miss. If I thought there is some terrible attack going on that's never happened, that's a lot of waste of resources. Or if there are obvious signs of an attack that AI just missed because it was having a bad day. I can't tolerate that as a defender. As an attacker, oops, screwed that one up, move on to another victim. It worries me that for the next 3 to 5 years, Nikolai, we are going to have a deluge of AI-enhanced cyber attacks. And AI is being used to defend. It is, but defending is a different problem than attacking. And AI is nowhere near as good at it. So that's my biggest fear, is that for the next few, maybe even several years, I think our cybersecurity problems are going to get worse, not better, because of AI.
I absolutely agree. And it's so interesting because many of the executive I work with still see this mainly as an IT issue. But I say, no, it's a leadership issue.
It is. It is. There are things that AI is able to do extremely well that has nothing to do directly with technology. It's just using a technology to solve a problem. It's like the Xerox machine. When I was in school, I had to read a book called Bartleby the Scrivener. I had no idea what a scrivener was. It was someone whose job was to copy important documents. Like you wanted a copy of someone's will or a marriage certificate, what have you. Well, there was no way to just copy it with technology. So it was people's job to just write copies. That was the whole thing. Well, that was put out of business when the Xerox machine came out. And I think AI, there are going to be dozens or hundreds of examples where jobs are no longer needed. We have a technology that can do them better than we ever could, like copying documents. And
copying CEOs. Yeah. So when you think
about a question there,
CEO fraud and voice cloning, these attacks are so realistic today. We know these cases where company lost millions of dollars due to successful frauds like this. Is it a cat and mouse game?
I think it is. I think right now we have a small benefit, Nikolai, in that doing a deep fake in real time is still a bit of a challenge. You know, you and I are having a real-time conversation right now, and the thought that a deep fake could pretend to be one of us with today's technology, I think that's a reach. It can't do that yet, but it does a fabulous job if it has even a few minutes to prepare to pretend. And the thought that you could have an incredibly convincing voicemail message or email message or even a video call or what have you. AI is doing that right now, and figuring out it's not the person is very challenging. What's worse is that you have criminals that are pretending to have either knowledge or even I'll go extreme on this. People are pretending to kidnap someone, like your loved one, your child. And they will have this very convincing deep fake because your child put all these videos on Instagram or TikTok. So you've got voice samples of this terrified child screaming for its mom. I don't know where I am. I've been kidnapped. I'm scared. I'm alone. Deepfake does a great job of that sort of deception. Then the criminal pretends to pick up the phone. You know, if you want to see your kid again, then you're going to have to pay up. Well, the lead up, what put you in a panic mode, what makes you think it's real, was all a fake.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening right now. So it does concern me that a few, maybe several, maybe just a few years from now, that Nikolai, it could be you and I are having this conversation, but really there is what's called a man in the middle attack of someone that's changing what I'm saying or you're saying to put a completely different tone on this conversation. And we might not even be aware of it.
Yeah. So therefore, with your example with the family, it's important to have a family code word.
Absolutely critical.
That you can prove, is it your family or is it not your loved ones?
That is an important thing. And it can't be something that you could get on social media. It can't be the name of your pet. It can't be, I know, a favorite food that you talk about. It needs to be something that you and your
Which is on Instagram.
That's the problem, is that we're sharing our whole lives on social media. It is important to be selective with what you share on social media. Because frankly, these AI engines being able to grab your entire social profile and then make reasonable guesses about what could a family code word be, that's a very realistic concern right now. So as an example, I'm a weekend auto racer. So anything about Porsches or racing, well, that would go well. I picked up scuba diving recently. That would be a good guess. I'm in cybersecurity, another good guess. Went to University of Illinois. All these things could come together where AI could come up with what might the top 10 code words be.
Yeah.
So you have to pick something that no one can research.
Yeah.
And but you're right, having those code words is important. We almost have to make an assumption, Nikolai, that AI is trying to find a way to pretend to convince us that someone isn't who they claim to be. Yeah. And we need to put in defenses against that. And that wasn't a thing. 50 years ago, the thought you're going to be recorded going down the street, unless you were a politician or a celebrity, that was ridiculous. Cameras were very expensive. Most people didn't have them. Well, now, good luck not being recorded walking down the street. And that's something our kids are dealing with that you and I didn't have to.
Yeah. So, but let's focus a little bit more to the companies we advise or we talk to. So, did you already see a fake video call from like a CEO fraud, which was very, very good? Or is it still more on phone or on email?
I have yet to have a client get a fake video coming in from AI to convince them to do something. There have been examples. There was an example, I think, out of Singapore where a CFO moved $20 million via a fake video chat from the CEO, but they never released the video. They never, there wasn't enough to know, not to be mean, but was it that convincing a fake to where anyone would fall for it? Or was that CFO not picking up on some obvious signs? I don't know.
Yeah, they had some accompanying emails, and they had also calls from a fake lawyer. So there were several sources for this person to make sure that the transfer would be done. So it was not just the video call.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I will say that I have had a number of clients get very convincing fake audio, and I've been surprised at how good it is. I've also been surprised at how cyber criminals have used many different media types together. Like per your example in Singapore, I had a client just a few months ago get a tremendous number of spam email messages, and they came through into their inbox because they were all specialized for that person. They weren't generic spam. If you read them, it was obvious they were junk. But imagine you open your inbox and there are 100 messages that are obvious nonsense. So what do? Well, then 5 minutes later, you get a call over Teams from your IT support. And for those listening to the audio only, I just put my hands in the air like I'm doing air quotes. And the IT team is now needs to help with this. And it's a cyber criminal trying to convince you to get into your computer. And they want you to hook up with them using LogMeIn123 or AnyDesk or TeamViewer or one of these remote control apps. And they're going to try to steal your banking credentials or infect you with a virus or look for your passwords or who knows what else. I have a lot of clients going through that mixed media type of attack. And the sort of spear phishing emails that I'm seeing come in that are very tailored to the person and very convincing, obviously with the help of AI, that's just become an epidemic at this stage of the game.
And they're getting better and better every week.
They are. They are. I think the technology is changing too quickly.
What other kinds of financial or reputational damage are organizations already experiencing because of AI-generated deception?
I think if someone wants to do a smear campaign against a company or against an individual, it has become much easier to do now than it ever has, because people don't fact check anymore. That isn't a thing. You can put up a video saying that the sky is green and the grass is blue, and let me show you examples, and AI will come up with plenty of them with green skies and blue grass, because so I think companies understanding how their brand can be tarnished by this is important, and staying in front of those things with their marketing is a very big deal. I think that leaders of companies need to have their own code words, things that are not put in email, things that are not discussed openly, but for them to be able to identify each other before an important decision or a large money transfer or what have you really takes place.
And taking their smartphone and calling the other person maybe is a good advice.
That is another very good way to go. I will say
it sounds so simple, but in the end, it can save your job.
You know, we did talk about how AI is making deepfakes real, and it is. But as of today's technology in 2026, just pick up the phone. It's not ready to, in real time, pretend to be somebody else and have a conversation like you and I are having right now. So until it's able to do that, the biggest competitive advantage you can have is to pick up the phone and make sure that when I'm talking to Nikolai, I'm actually talking to Nikolai.
Yeah. Tell me, to your experience, are there industries which are more vulnerable than others?
It's a good question. I think early on, the AI revolution's been going on for a few years. You could even say several years, but for all companies, I'd say a few years. Financial services is an obvious target because they move money around. And if you can get them to move it to you, well, you're having a good day. So I think financial services has been disproportionately targeted. But the same thing happened in the 1980s when ATMs came out and people were climbing telephone poles to listen in on how the ATMs asked the mainframe, do I give out the money or not? They figured out how to spoof it and got the money. So financial services is staying ahead of the game pretty well, in my opinion, at least most of the time. I think manufacturing has a tremendous amount of potential benefit from AI, and they are often years or even decades behind other industries. So I see that having a significant play. I think healthcare has a lot of concerns about AI being used in nefarious ways, but healthcare has embraced a lot of AI's ability. One of the biggest things that it can do is to look at a group of x-rays, a group of MRI scans, a group of test results, and come up with meaningful correlations that people missed and say, here's an indicator that appears to show a certain cancer or what have you. So I think healthcare is probably ahead of the game in embracing AI. But I think there could be some negatives to come. I think manufacturing is behind the game more than not, in my opinion.
Especially because lots of production lines are still working with old operation systems. So if they are connected to the internet, they're an easy target.
Very. Yes. A lot of manufacturing companies don't understand that when they have one of these antiquated machines that can't be patched for cybersecurity issues anymore, they essentially, what they have is a gasoline can. And we all know that you don't keep petrol in a glass jar on a shelf. That's very dangerous. You have these red, we call them jerry cans here, but you have these containers designed to hold gasoline. Well, on the manufacturing floor, that's called a SCADA environment. And it's designed to wall off that area because we know it's cyber insecure. And so we're going to put protections in place. And they work well. But if companies don't know to do that, they're going to be in real trouble. And sometimes those SCADA environments need holes poked in them to allow advantages like AI to do their jobs. And that's okay. It's okay to have some risk on your manufacturing floor. But the book I wrote several years ago is called Secure Enough with a question mark. We don't need to be bulletproof. We need to be secure enough for our risk tolerance. And a lot of companies don't understand the risk that AI presents.
So if you were advising a board tomorrow morning, for example, what are the first 3 things you would tell them to implement immediately?
They need a research and development budget to explore how AI can help their company, their industry. If they don't have a budget and a team around that, I think they're going to fall behind. That's number 1. Number 2, they need to rethink how they are setting up their cybersecurity posture and profile in the wake of AI, because the things that we told people to avoid malicious emails, like obvious misspellings or obvious non-native speakers of whatever language you happen to speak, those things don't hold weight anymore. So they need to rethink their cybersecurity program in the wake of AI. I think the third thing that I would say is that employees are becoming more and more integrated when it comes to their work life and their personal life. And that the number of employees that will use an AI tool, either that's free or they'll set up their own $20 a month subscription to an AI tool and start using it for business purposes. I think a lot of people think they're doing their company a favor by exploring it off on their own. And while their intentions are good, putting your company's intellectual property, your client list, your secrets, whatever it is that gives you a competitive advantage into some big AI engine, that can have disastrously negative consequences. And I don't think that there's enough education, understanding, and embracing that AI is very powerful and has to be used very carefully. So those are the 3 areas I would tell a board they need to start thinking about right now.
Okay. So what I tell my clients a lot of times, the real danger is not only the fake content, it's more or less the collapse of verification or the absence of wisdom about verification.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, that business processes need to change because AI makes it so easy to convince someone that what they took on face value last year or 2 or 3 years ago is no longer the case. I agree with that. I think that should be part of what they're doing.
So let's talk a little bit about governance and law and accountability. In your chapter in our book, you discuss the growing gap between AI innovation and regulation. Why are the legal systems struggling so much?
Laws always lag behind technology. I mean, the most famous cyber attack that I'm aware of happened almost 200 years ago. There was a system in France that could move data. They had a bunch of towers, and they had little arms on the towers. An operator could manipulate those arms to look like letters, and they were about 20 kilometers apart. And they had folks with telescopes that could see the one behind them and then relay that to the one in front of them. And they could move information faster than anything else could at the time. Well, someone figured out if they could bribe one of the operators to hide some messages in there, well, they could know what the stock market did in one end of France before anybody else did. And then they could bet against it. Well, these two brothers were caught doing this in like 1834, I think. And they were tried and they were acquitted because there was no law saying you're not allowed to do that. This was a new technology. No one had ever abused the technology like that before. They had to make up laws. Well, we have the same problem with many technologies. Right now, we are struggling with deepfakes that are producing adult content with someone's head on it who is not an actor or actress who agreed to be in an adult movie. And a lot of laws are springing up about that. So this is a hot topic right now. And it's happening because the technology has allowed this to take place. It used to take a lot of specialized equipment, and it was pretty obvious it wasn't real. And now it doesn't. And it does look pretty real. So the laws have to change. I think to some extent it's expected that laws are going to lag behind. The problem that we have now is that deepfakes are changing our perception of reality. And that puts us in a real pickle, Nikolai. A lot of governments don't mind if realities change to some extent, as long as it's in their favor. If it's in that government's ability to retain power, if it's in that government's ability to make their competitors look bad, they don't mind that reality's changed a little bit. And I think that's part of the problem we're having with these laws keeping up, is that everybody wants everybody to play fair except them. Whoever the them is, no, it's okay what they're doing. And we have lawmakers in that position right now that are trying to find ways to manipulate the system in their party or their themselves favor.
Don't we have to change the way we are setting rules, because the technology will always be faster than the process of creating new laws? So isn't it not the wrong way to set specific rules, or just to say, okay, if you do something which could be meant as unfair, it's enough to be fined?
It's an interesting question. There are two things that came to mind that we're still grappling with, at least in America. I think it was almost 50 years ago, there was a comedian named George Carlin, absolutely hilarious, first ever host of Saturday Night Live, and he tried to help define what obscene words were. And he had, I think, 7 words, which I will not repeat, but they went all the way to the Supreme Court. And by a 5-4 decision, they were found to be obscene. So you can't use them in broadcast television and what have you. But it brought up a larger question about what is adult content, what is pornography. And it kind of came down to, I can't easily define it, but I know it when I see it. Well, that's pretty vague. That's a vague statement. It's kind of still the world that we're dealing with, at least in the United States. We also have securities fraud in the United States. And there's a growing theme here that anything bad that happens to a company is securities fraud. That a bad thing happened either because the board or the executives said to do it, or because they didn't see that it was going to be a bad thing and the stock went down, and therefore you've committed securities fraud. And there are lots of lawsuits around that. So we have some areas where we have these vague laws, and the case law, like how it's interpreted in the courts, is really where the meat comes out of it. And maybe we do need to move to that sort of area where using AI technology to distort reality is a negative and you're not allowed to do it. And that's a pretty vague thing to say, because where do you draw the line between distorting reality or just giving a different point of view? I'll go back to my "the sky is green and the grass is blue" example. Well, that's obviously not true. But what if someone comes up with an example saying in certain areas of color blindness, they might actually see the sky and the grass is the same color? See, so that's interesting science, and it's not distortion. This is going to be a hard question to answer, Nikolai, is where do we put a law down saying you shouldn't use AI to change people's sense of reality? Because in some way, we do that all the time. These large blockbuster movies about science fiction and such, well, they're designed to not be about reality, but it's obvious. Guardians of the Galaxy is not real. But now that people can make those sorts of spectacular effects and put them in an area where it might look like it's reality, well, at which point is it free speech versus you're creating a negative impact on society? I don't have a great answer to it, but it's sure a great question.
Bryce, that brings me to the next question. It's about accountability, and you raised this issue in your part of the book. Who is responsible when AI generated systems create damage? The company or the user?
Man, that's hard. The best example of the partnership that I've seen with a technology and the users of it being equally responsible for a good outcome is automobiles. 75 years ago, if you got into a car accident and got hurt, well, just learn to drive. I mean, if you were a good driver, you wouldn't get into an accident. But then we had people starting to go through windshields, and they realized that was really bad. So they started coming up with better windshields that would hold together even in a crash. Mm-hmm. And it was the beginning of some safety laws. Well, now we've reached an area where most countries have very rigorous safety requirements where if you're going to sell a car in that country, it has to have crumple zones and airbags and side impact protection and so on and so forth. And I think Germany and the US are both great examples of this. And some of the laws are a little weird. I happen to have a Porsche, and because it has bright headlights, Germany demands it has headlight washers. Kind of a weird law, but I have headlight washers on mine. Oh, okay. But there are certain technologies built into cars. They make the cars safer. And the driver of the car has to have a license, and they have to have rules and training. And there are certain rules of the road that you have to follow, or else you can get a fine for that. My favorite example of that is the tragedy of losing Lady Di in the 90s. She was in a Mercedes S-Class, arguably one of the safest cars on the planet. If you drive it into a bridge abutment at 100 miles an hour and aren't wearing your seatbelt, the car can't save you. The driver has responsibility too. I think that's where we need to go with AI.
We need an AI license for everyone using it?
License, no. Training, I think it makes some sense. We train people in a number of areas to live in our society. It's awfully hard to get a job of any kind without a high school diploma in the US. Many jobs require further education. It could be a license, a certificate, what have you. But the thought that we have education as to what AI can do, how it's used, so that people understand the basics of this, I think could be helpful. But we run into the same problem where laws lag behind what's happening in reality. Well, education lags behind it too. My father was a dentist, and if he did not have a dental degree, a DDS, he would not be allowed to practice dentistry in America. As a lawyer, you have to be certified by each state to be able to practice law. Well, I'm in cybersecurity, and I've been in the game in some form or fashion for 25 years. I have been dedicated to the game for over 10 years now. I think of myself as an authority in the space. I happen to have a certificate called a CISM, Certified Information Security Manager. I don't need it to do what I do. I think there should be more training, but no, we can't require everyone to have some sort of license to use AI the way that we do a driver's license. By the same token, having some education as to how this technology works and what it can be used for, both good and bad, I think makes a lot of sense.
So we haven't talked about hallucinations, and everyone who uses AI finds out sooner or later that sometimes AI software is hallucinating. So how dangerous are these hallucinations in a professional environment, like in organizations or companies, especially when the leaders trust the AI-generated outputs too quickly without training?
It's extremely dangerous if people don't understand the common sense that goes into a decision. We have more and more examples of AI being agentic, which means it can actually perform an action, not just give information. I use AI to give information, to write reports, to analyze data, that kind of thing. Well, there are these tools like OpenClaw that sit on your computer, and they will actually answer your emails for you. They'll try to help schedule your calendar. Those are actually doing things. Mm. What we're doing with that technology, Nikolai, it's like giving a 10-year-old an acetylene torch. It could be that this youth is particularly gifted in welding and has had some training, could do a lot of great work. And it could be he cuts through his own acetylene lines and burns his house down. Yeah. AI hallucinates a lot, and it often doesn't know when it's hallucinating, like my example earlier of giving me the distance and the speed of light between the Earth and Mars, not the Sun and Mars, which is not what I asked. But I knew via common sense the answer cannot be 3 minutes. That's lunacy. If you don't know how and where to second guess what you're getting out of AI, these hallucinations can be catastrophic. So it's kind of like using, so I was raised using a calculator. And if you accidentally add or subtract a zero in a calculator, it'll lead you astray. If you miss a click or a decimal point, you can get a wildly inaccurate answer. My father learned using a slide rule. Mm-hmm. And a slide rule, you have to have a vague idea as to where you're going for it to work. You aren't going to be off by a factor of 10 or 100 or 1,000 on a slide rule. Because if you're estimating, say, the fuel mileage of your car, well, it's not going to be 2 miles a gallon. It's not going to be 200. Those answers are ridiculous. See, but 20 is a reasonable answer. You have to have an idea as to where you're going in order to trust the AI. And if you don't have folks that understand the questions that are being asked and what reasonable answers are and aren't, you can be in a lot of trouble.
Absolutely. But given the speed of development we have right now, could we eventually face a situation where companies no longer fully understand how decisions are made inside?
It's a worry. When I use AI and I get an answer that seems silly, I will question it. And if it can't give me an explanation that makes sense, I've actually gone so far as to say, unless you can cite 3 sources that support what you're doing, I'm going to assume that you're hallucinating. And I've had it come back. You're right. I can't find any sources. Here's what I found sources on, and it actually says something different. So thinking of AI as a lazy high school student, very bright, lazy high school student, so often does a lot of really good work and sometimes is phoning it in. I don't know if that's a phrase in Germany, but here it means that you are not doing your best work. You're at the meeting, but you're not paying attention. Is phoning it in. And AI will often phone it in. It doesn't understand reality. There was an example, a very famous one a year or two ago, where someone said the cheese is falling off my pizza. What can I do to help? And AI recommended using glue, that put some glue on the pizza to help hold the cheese on. Well, someone found a Reddit posting where someone put that up as a joke. And it was obvious to us humans it's a joke. Well, AI doesn't understand any more reality than what it's trained to understand on. And if the users of it don't understand that, we got a problem.
Well, and that's about trust. So that's also one of the central ideas in our book, that trust becomes a strategic asset in the age of AI. Why is trust suddenly becoming so important?
Because it's going to be harder and harder to come by. AI is making it harder to trust. And the folks that understand what is and isn't reasonable to trust either an AI engine to give you information on, or to perform an action, or to try to pretend to be somebody that they aren't. The AI engines are going to get better and better at these things. And that's going to make our understanding of what trust really is harder and harder to define. I think we need to have more safeguards against people pretending to be someone they aren't or giving information that isn't accurate. And most of us have not been in an environment where it's assumed there could be misinformation. I think wartime is a great example of lots of misinformation. False flag operations are huge. Deception is huge.
Definitely.
The Allied forces did a great job trying to obfuscate where we were going to land on D-Day so that the Axis forces weren't as well prepared. And other than Normandy, we did a pretty good job. But I think it was Normandy was the beach where they had their defenses up, and it was a much, much more poor outcome for the Allied forces as a result. But unless you've been in the military, most of us aren't used to assuming negative intent until proven otherwise. And I think that's really at the heart of what the AI change and cybersecurity in general is forcing us, is that trust needs to be earned as part of every transaction, as part of every interaction. There should be an assumption of mistrust until proven otherwise, especially for big, important decisions.
So, in your experience, what destroys trust fastest inside organizations during this transformation with AI?
I think a lack of communication between organizations or people. It's very easy for all of us to live in our own reality if we want to. There was a famous interview by Obama, and he put at the end of his administration, his people came to him with 3 separate computers. And they were all just had a Google prompt. But one was a user that had logged in enough to where Google was pretty convinced this was a left-leaning person. And then there was a second one, it was a right-leaning person. And then the third one was a brand new user. And Google didn't know what to make of it. And they just typed in the word Egypt. And that was it. And the left-leaning person, it brought up the humanitarian crisis. It brought up the need for better government controls, those kind of things. The right-leaning person, it brought up business opportunities and investments for Egypt and such. The new person, it brought up tourism. Maybe you want to go to Egypt, didn't know what to do with you. Those are 3 separate realities with the same prompt. And I think if we don't spend more time on what the company culture needs to be and have these organizations within the organizations talk to each other, collaborate, understand each other's point of view, preferably in the same room if possible, I think AI is going to make it even easier for us to crawl into our own little micro reality and fall victim to confirmation bias, as opposed to questioning why things are the way they are, and maybe they're not the way we think they are.
So what role does communication and human intelligence play when companies introduce AI-driven systems?
I think the human element is going to be critically important, certainly for the rest of our lifetimes, hopefully forever. I think the new technologies we're using are very easy to think of as sentient, as a friend, as someone looking out for you. And none of that's true. This is a piece of technology. It is morally agnostic. It is going to give answers based on its training. The guardrails that are put in place for it, people are going to poke at those constantly. It's a difficult question to give an easy answer to. But I'll say the number of people trying to find the answer and continuing to question, are we doing enough to have our culture stay cohesive, to have our sense of reality be coherent among everyone in the company? I think it's an area we're going to need to spend more and more time on.
A lot of executives do not communicate directly with their employees. They communicate via video, via calls, via message boards electronically, via apps. That's the point. So
okay,
I always say try to communicate as much as possible on a personal level.
I'm in agreement with that. I think having face-to-face interactions is something that AI can't get in the way of. I think having real-time communications like you and I are having right now, even though it's recording, we're talking to each other in real time. I think it's important to do that whenever possible. It's also important to be as transparent as you can with your employees. Yes, AI makes misinformation much easier to disseminate, but nature abhors a vacuum. And if you give limited information, speculation will run wild, and that introduces the ability for AI-generated content to fill that void. So I think one of the things I would tell executives is be as transparent as possible. Make sure you have a cohesive story, because it's harder for someone to poke holes in a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you give them little dribs and drabs of information, it's easy for people to try to make up what's going on behind the scenes.
So the more AI enters organizations, the more human leadership has to become?
I think the more interpersonal human leadership has to become. Yeah. Yes. I think that relationships are going to become more important than ever. And frankly, that shift happened in part with the rise of the internet and us being able to communicate in a more staccato way, where emails were taking over. And I think social media has made the problem worse. And now AI is making the problem weaponizable. And maybe more communication like we're having right now is one of the easy steps for us to take. And leaders should be doing more of it.
What gives you optimism despite all these developments we just talked about?
AI will let us get more done. It will let us do things that used to be very time consuming and make them easier. And it will also make them more accessible. That gives me a lot of optimism that these tools, I know billions and billions of dollars are going into it, but in our lifetimes, Nikolai, when we wanted to make a long distance call as a kid, that was very expensive. And now it's essentially free. You know, you are in Munich, Germany. I am in Minnesota. The cost of this isn't zero, but it's pretty close for us to do what it is we're doing. And we're even over video. 50 years ago, this would have required satellites, television studios, and probably been tens of thousands of dollars per minute to pull off. And I'm optimistic that these tools can spawn a lot more innovation. After that, I'm all pessimism.
So let's talk about the book for some moments. So why was it important for you to contribute to The Age of Fakes?
I liked what I read in it. I thought a lot of the content in the German version was very strong. And the thought of looking at the legal aspects of AI was always something that I had some interest in. And I thought this was a wonderful way to try to contribute to the general knowledge around AI that people have the ability to consume.
And if the readers take away only one central message from your chapter, what should it be?
The amount of power that we are giving to the AI engines to manipulate not just laws about AI, because all industries try to do that, they're called lobbyists. The ability for AI to manipulate how laws are written or interpreted is tremendous. We should demand more from our governments, our leaders, our politicians about where it is and isn't appropriate to use AI in government situations.
So, where do you hope this global discussion about AI and trust will go over the next few years?
I hope we can get to a point where people do not lean towards confirmation bias about whatever topic or opinion or reality they think, because what our social media engines do is as soon as they think we have a certain leaning, well, they think they can get more of our eyeballs, more of our time on information that confirms that what we think or how we feel is right. And I hope we can get to a point where AI helps us question the different realities that we all live in and can lead to greater education. You know, you take any hot button topic here in the States, should we legalize marijuana or not? Is abortion, should it be banned or not? Any of these hot button topics. It doesn't matter if you are very for or very against the hot button topic. As you educate yourself on one of these topics, invariably, everybody goes towards the middle. Everyone ends up where I can see both sides of it. And AI is going to make it harder for us to understand what reality is, And I hope we get to a point where we're interested as humans in doing more questioning of what reality really is or isn't, because I think it can lead us to a better place long term as we educate ourselves on these hot button topics.
Bryce, thank you so much for this, in the end, philosophical conversation. I think one thing becomes very clear to me. Artificial intelligence is not only changing technology, it is changing trust, leadership, communication, and ultimately the way organizations make their decisions. And maybe that is the central challenge of our time. How do we remain human in systems increasingly shaped by machines? Thank you again, dear Bryce, and thank you, dear audience, for joining us today. And if you found this conversation valuable, feel free to share it, subscribe to the channel, and have a look to our new book, The Age of Fakes: How AI Abuse, Fake News, and Deepfakes Threaten Business and Society. See you next time on Impulses and Perspective. Bye-bye.
If you would like to watch all of our new episodes, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.